Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about the annotated bibliography, which will be done in MLA style. And there's quite a few things that we need to know about the MLA annotated bibliography in regards to your argumentative research paper. First of all, this is your grader for the week. He's really tough on rubrics, but he really knows his MLA stuff. So our objectives are that you're able to use research methods such as EBSCOhost to find sources to support your argument. You can understand how to determine if a source is credible, and you can write a college-level essay with fluent, versatile prose style. So the bibliography first is another word for the works cited page when you're writing a paper in MLA 9 style. It lists all of the sources that you're going to cite in your research project. It includes all of the bibliographic information that is needed to cite your source correctly, such as the author, title, publisher, year, and the page range, if one is included, because web pages, of course, will not have a page range. And the great thing about the annotated bib is that once you have completed it, it will help you create your works cited page, because the first part of an annotated bib is the citation. So what you are doing here for an annotated bibliography, or annotated bib for short, is you are creating the citation as you would as if you were putting this on the works cited page at the end of your research paper. But we call it annotated because what you're doing is you're giving us notes that explain the different things about the source that you have found. Okay? The other great thing about this is that as you go through these sources for the annotated bib, you can determine which sources are going to be better suited for your research paper and for the research question that you're asking in your proposal. So one of the first things you'll do in an annotated bib is you will summarize. You want to know what the source is about, the argument that the author is trying to get across to you as the audience. You will explain the source in your own words. So this goes back to summary and paraphrase that you did back in English 101 as the very first paper. And the summary allows you to think about the source in your own way. How are you going to use this source? Where is it going to be most beneficial in your paper? For the analysis part of the annotated bib, we want to think about the usefulness of the source. How's the source going to help you in your topic? Does it fit with the other things that you're thinking about using for your research? Is it useful? And most important is the author credible? Do they know what they're talking about? Essentially, do they have ethos? Do they have credibility of character? You want to look at maybe other types of research they've done, or you also want to look at their degree credentials, for example. Okay, then the last part of the annotated bib is the reflection. This is where you're going to think about what the source means to you. The thing that's really important here is not only is it useful, but does it expand your understanding of the topic, and how will you use this? So this slide here is just a recap of everything that we've talked about in a kind of a short form. We want to know what the main points of the source are. We want to know the arguments and evidence in the source. Is it weak or strong? Does it provide supporting data? Does it suggest solutions or improvements? And if it's a policy, does it mention a specific bill, or does it address something specifically in its policy analysis? Okay, so keep in mind that the reason that we do call this an annotated bib is because we are making annotations, we are making notes, we're going through and finding things that we think are going to be useful for our paper that will support our thesis statement. Okay, you can use this for any text, journal articles, book chapters, when you have to read several chapters in a text for one of your professors in any of your other classes, books that you're just reading for your own leisure. And then make sure with the summary and analysis of the text that you are summarizing the source, you're evaluating and reflecting. Okay, so short annotations, because sometimes when you're making annotations, it can be on a much longer text. But if it's a short annotation, you want to make sure you got a brief summary. It gives you a broad overview of what that article is about. It's good for practicing concise writing, where you may be limited to only 250 words. And sometimes we have a tendency to go over that. So this way you can practice how to shorten your writing but still get the same message across. Okay? And last but not least, it's just really useful for keeping track of all the sources in your research. The other thing about short annotations is that you get the major points and you highlight the usefulness in relation to the source, in relation to your research topic, or as the other part of this assignment that you'll be turning in, the research proposal. Okay, this is another infographic just to kind of summarize for you different things to think about when you're writing your annotated bibliography. So I would suggest glancing over this to make sure that you're following the things that you need to do. Okay, here is an example of an annotated bib that comes from EBSCOhost. Um, and you'll notice that it has the things that need to be included. The only thing here is that it's very, very short. Most annotated bibs are between 200 and 250 words. Okay, now, just recently you read Girabaldi's article for a discussion board, I think a week or two ago. Um, Usually I do this in class where I have people work together, but since you guys are online, I want you to look for the link in week 13 for the samples, and it will say annotated bib Garibaldi samples. It's in week 13. Okay, what I want you to do is there are 3 different annotated bibs there, and I want you to look at each one of those. 4 things I want you to look for. Is the citation correct? Does it summarize the source? Does it evaluate the credibility of the source? And does it discuss how it applies to the topic and thesis statement? Okay. Now, the Mentimeter is not working on this one, so we can skip that. But I do still want you to take a look at those 3 samples because, and this is where it gets interesting, all 3 of those samples are AI generated. Every single one of them. Okay. So this just lets you know that sometimes AI is not very reliable. It's definitely not something you should turn in as an assignment. Okay. And 3, because it's not reliable, sometimes it can be biased. So on the next slide, I have a correct version of an annotated bibliography that I wrote. And I want you to look at this sample and notice that all the elements required in the rubric are in the example. So let's take a look at that. Okay, you can see I've got the correct citation up there. Everything is double spaced as it's supposed to be in MLA format. Okay, and you'll notice that the very first sentence, I introduced the article and I gave you a very short summary of what it is about. All of that's in the first sentence. I list the author, the article, and a very short summary. Okay, then I'll go into detail where in the next sentence I talk about the thesis statement. Okay, and how he uses personal anecdotes about one of his students who was named Brandon. Um, but I also kind of demonstrate how he leans into the stereotype that male students versus female students are changed differently, and the stereotypes associated with male and female students, that males are seen as disruptive and disrespectful. Okay. Um, then I go on to talk about how he talks about the fact that elementary school teachers are female, and because of this, the male students seek out their approval even as they get older. But I also show the contrast or the counter argument that logical fallacies do exist in his argument, specifically his teaching career, which was only 4 years. And he assumes that all male students perform at low levels, which we know is not true at all. Um, and then I do put in a couple of quotes, but you'll notice they're very short, just to prove my point of what I'm talking about, and I do have them cited correctly. And then I end with talking about his assumptions that male students are not supported, but that statistical evidence is only used here to show his opinion and his lack of teaching experience. Okay, so keep in mind that all the things that are listed in this sample here that I've written for you show all the things that you will need to include yourself as you're writing your annotated bib for each one of your 8 sources. Okay, because this assignment, I require you to find 8. Now, for your final paper, there's only 5 sources that you are required to use. You can use more than that, but if you only use 5, having 8 gives you 3 extra articles that you can use in case one of your 5 does not work out. Okay, I will see you guys next week.